Very good morning to all. The Department of Neurosurgery has been contributing in the field of craniovertebral junction anomalies from last 3.5 decades. The pediatric patients account for 1/4 of all CV junction anomalies, posing significant psychosocial and financial burden to our nation. We would like to share this journey, highlighting the major contribution of our senior colleagues in the past, the present time challenges, and future possibilities to curb this disease. With this, I would like to invite Dr. Shauman to start with the CGI presentation. Dr. Shauman, please.
Good morning, everyone. Craniovertebral junction is the most mobile and hence the most unstable joint in the body. Major neurostructures such as the upper spinal cord, the lower end of the medulla, the lower cranial nerves, the upper cervical nerves lies here. Thus, we may say that life rests here, as any trivial insult to this part of the body may result in quadriparesis along with respiratory and cardiac compromise. This vital area is enclosed by bony framework, which comprises of the clivus and the occiput, which forms the foramen magnum, the C1 and C2 vertebrae, along with their ligamentous attachments. The global burden of this anomaly is variable, with the prevalence rate of 0.08 to 2% in the general population. In India, it is more commonly seen in the northern states such as Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Bihar, parts of the Rajasthan and Gujarat. In a study performed by our institute, it has been seen that the prevalence is even more in the population residing along the Ganges belt. This anomaly may occur alone or have been seen to be associated with approximately 83 congenital syndromes. To enumerate a few that we have came across in our practice are Larsen syndrome, Morquio syndrome, and Down syndrome. Now, speaking about CV junction anomaly, there are some terminologies that we need to get acquainted with: the atlantoaxial dislocation and basilar invagination. These are the sagittal CT images of the craniovertebral junction. This is the normal view, where we can see this is the anterior arch of the atlas, and this is the C2 vertebra with its odontoid process. The distance between these two bony structures, the atlas and the dens, is termed as the atlantodental interval. In a normal individual, the atlantodental interval, or the ADI, increases with flexion and decreases with extension. If the ADI is more than 4.5 mm in flexion in pediatric age group, it is termed as atlantoaxial dislocation. The tip of the dens, it lies below the level of the foramen magnum. If it migrates upwards and protrudes beyond the edge of the foramen magnum, it is termed as basilar invagination. Now, if the ADI is more than 4.5 mm in flexion and it reduces on extension of the neck, it is termed as reducible AD. If it is more than 4.5 mm in flexion and persist during extension, it is termed as irreducible AD. In about 80% of the cases of irreducible AD, it is associated with basilar invagination, where there is upward migration of the tip of the dens beyond the edge of the foramen magnum. In about 30% of the cases of irreducible AD, it is further complicated with presence of Chiari malformation, where there is downward herniation of the cerebellar tonsils with development of consequent syringomyelia. The third part of the vertebral artery, it courses along the CV junction, and it may have an anomalous course owing to the anomalous bony development, and this poses further challenges in the operative management in these patients. Now, the patients of atlantoaxial dislocation, they usually present with progressive spastic quadriparesis, and they might also have symptoms of respiratory distress along with urinary complaints. In presence of BI, they may have additional features of lower cranial involvement along with central cord syndrome. In the patients who have additional Chiari malformation, they may complain of headache as well as cerebellar signs may be present. Now, our departmental protocol for management of this patient is performed with serial radiological investigation. We start with a plain cervical X-ray in erect posture in flexion and extension of the neck. we follow it by with an MR CV junction to look for the neural structures. We then perform a CT CV junction in a dynamic view to look for bony anomalies. Finally, we do a CT angiography for vertebral artery evaluation to rule out the presence of any anomalous course of the vertebral artery. In addition to the above investigation, we also perform pulmonary function test, as this patient presents with poor pulmonary reserve, and urodynamic study to assess the type of bladder dysfunction. The principle of management in these patients are simple. In a normal individual, the CV junction is funnel shaped. In presence of basilar invagination, it attains an hourglass. Our aim is to make it funnel shaped again. Thus, the goal of the surgery is elevation of compression from the neuraxis, realignment of bony anatomy, and bony fixation in reduced position. This can be achieved by posterior C1 C2 reduction and fixation, where we can appreciate in this picture there is increase in the ADI with compression of the neuraxis, and it has been reduced and followed by posterior fixation. In presence of basilar invagination, here in this picture we can see there is basilar invagination with assimilated C1. What we have done is that we have distracted the C1 and C2 joint by placing a spacer, and we have fixed it in reduced position. If we anticipate that there may be features of persistent compression of the spinal cord after posterior fixation, we usually go with transoral decompression, where we remove the part of the dens which is compressing the spinal cord anteriorly, followed by posterior fixation in the same sitting. Conversely, in a patient who has undergone posterior fixation and continues to have features of compression of the spinal cord, we may plan for transoral decompression in the later settings. So our institutional protocol for management of this patient is that when a patient with CV junction anomaly comes to us, we get a dynamic CT scan done, and to define whether it is a reducible AD or irreducible AD. In presence of reducible AD, if it is a reducible AD, we straight away go with C1 C2 posterior fixation. If it is an irreducible AD, we find out whether it is associated with basilar invagination or without basilar invagination. In absence of basilar invagination, we reduce the C1 C2 joint and do posterior fixation. In presence of basilar invagination, we assess whether the patient is having symmetrical facet joints. In such a case, we distract the C1 and C2 by introducing a spacer in between the C1 C2 joint, followed by posterior fixation. If the patient continues to have features of spinal cord compression, we then plan for transoral decompression in a later setting. In presence of complex basilar invagination, such as presence of high BI, facet joint asymmetry, coronal tilt rotational anomaly, we plan for transoral decompression followed by posterior fixation in the same sitting. So now I will request Dr. Vandan to share our experience in managing these patients over the last 3 decades. Dr. Vandan.
I'll be sharing a departmental experience of last 3.5 decades and a detailed analysis of last 1 decade. We have been performing these complex CV junction anomaly surgeries since the inception of our department, and these surgeries have been modified with various technological nuances over the years. Surgeries performed 2 decades back were different from those performed today. We have operated upon 1755 patients till January 2021. Pediatric patients accounted for 25% of these cases, out of which 3/4 were irreducible AD and 1/4 were reducible AD. This slide shows obvious predilection towards male patients. Mean age of the whole group was nearly 12 years, with no significant difference between the mean ages of male and female subgroups. In the initial 2.5 decades, the treatment algorithm was very simple. All the reducible ADs were operated by posterior approaches, while all the irreducible AD was operated by an anterior followed by a posterior approach. This slide showing a predominance of posterior approaches is primarily because of our preference of the posterior approach in the last decade in sync with the worldwide changes in the management philosophy. Based on the timing of development of primary and secondary ossification centers at the CV junction, we have divided all our patients in 3 age groups: 0 to 9 years, 10 to 12 years, and 13 to 18 years. Most of our patients presented in 13 to 18 years of age. It is to be noted that patients presenting late had irreducible AD, while reducible AD was more prevalent in younger children. There were 4 types of syndromic CVJ anomalies operated upon, out of which Klippel-Field anomaly was most commonly encountered. Of 431 pediatric patients operated upon, 168 patients were operated during the year 1988 to 1996, whose detailed analysis has been analyzed and published. 169 patients operated during the year 1997 to 2011 have been analyzed and published. Data of 94 patients operated from 2012 to 2021 is presented here. 13 of these patients were lost to follow-up. The most common clinical presentation in our experience was spastic weakness, followed by neck restriction. Other symptoms included neck pain, sensory loss, shortness of breath, and bladder involvement. Preoperative respiratory compromise justifies a workup of pulmonary function test. The commonest bony anomaly encountered was irreducible AD. 3/4 of our AD cases were irreducible type, while 1/4 were of reducible variety. In addition, the following anomalies were found in different combinations. These included basilar invagination, C1C2 asymmetry, osteodontodium, and anomalous vertebral artery. Spinal cord changes were found in 53 of these 94 patients, and it included syringomyelia, myelomalacia of cord, and cord edema. This slide shows distribution of patients in different grades of hypotonia as per modified Ellsworth scale. We can see an improvement in MAS grades after the surgery. Most of the patients were in grade 2 and 3 preoperatively, which improved to grade 0 and 1 after the surgery. This slide shows functional outcome as per Nurix's grading system. Here the grade 0 denotes minimal signs and symptoms, and the severity of disease increases from 0 to grade 5. We can clearly see a post-operative improvement in the score, which is continued in the follow-up period. The median duration of post-operative stay of our patients was 8 days. A deeper look into the Nurix grading in a patient showed that 25 of the 26 patients in the good preoperative score maintained their status after the surgery, as compared to those patients who had poor preoperative scores, where improvement to good grade was seen in only 44% of these patients. This suggests that the greatest determinant of the postoperative outcome is the preoperative status. Hence, we recommend that this patient should be referred for surgery as early as possible. We had a complication rate of about 11%. The most common complication was posterior wound infection, and the other complications were ventilator dependence, vertebral artery injury, CSF leak, implant failure, and oral wound dehiscence. The mean follow-up duration of this analysis was 63 months. Of the 73 patients available for follow-up at the current time, more than 60% of the patients were in good functional grades, which suggests the importance of surgery done at the right time. There were 2 postoperative mortalities, one due to septicemia and other due to severe gastrointestinal bleed. 6 patients had died during the follow-up. Now I invite my colleague Dr. Vikas to show you some representative cases.
I will presenting some representative cases of pediatric CVJ anomaly. Starting with case 1, this is 12-year-old boy presented with a complaint of spastic quadriparesis with bilateral tingling sensation for last 2 years. There was no history of any bladder bowel involvement. On examination, patient had hypertonia and 2/5 power in right upper and lower limb and 3/5 in left upper and lower limb. This is MRI showing there is cord compression at cervicomedullary junction, and this is the CT flexion showing there is increased atlantodental interval, and in extension there is decreased atlanto interval. So this was case of reducible AD with compressive myelopathy and Nurix grade 4. After all the investigations and pre-op planning, patient was operated. Posterior C1C2 fixation was done. Post-op CT showing this is the C1C2 fixation. Post-operatively, patient has improvement in power and tone improved from grade 3 to grade 1. After 2 months of follow-up, patient was self-ambulatory without any support. Coming to the second case, 11-year-old boy presented with progressive spastic quadriparesis for last 4 months difficulty in passing urine and stool for last 4 months. On evaluation, patient has 4/5 power in right upper and lower limb with 4/5 power in left upper and lower limb, and tone was increased in all 4 limbs. This is MRI sagittal section showing there is cord compression at cervicomedullary junction with some cord intensity changes, and CT showing AD with VI with occipitalized C1 arch. So this was case of irreducible AD with VI. Compared to the first case, this patient has not only AD but also VI. So we need to distract C1 C2 joint to bring down the tip of odontoid below. That has been achieved with joint manipulation and spacer placement between C1 C2 joint and posterior fixation. At the time of discharge, patient has improvement in power and tone improved from grade 2 to grade 1. After 4 months of follow-up, patient was self-ambulatory. In third case, I will discuss an interesting case with you. This is 3-year-old boy. When this child came in SGPGI, he was bedridden and presented with progressive spastic quadriparesis with restricted neck movement for last 2 years. On examination, patient had hypertonia 3/5 power in upper and lower limbs. Patient was diagnosed case of Marquis syndrome. Marquis syndrome is very rare genetic disorder which involves bone and spine. It is type 4 mucopolysaccharidosis in which creatine sulfate deposited at the different body parts. This phase is known as dysphase, in which face looks like concave due to underdevelopment of nose and maxilla. Marquis syndrome is also associated with different bony deformity like knock knee. This is CT showing odontoid hypoplasia in Marquis syndrome, and MRI showing canal stenosis with mucopolysaccharide deposition at cervicomedullary junction causing cord compression. So this was case of reducible AAD with Marquis syndrome. This is complex sets of patient, but we have large experience to deal such type of patient. To operate such type of small kids with syndromic association is clinically challenging because mucopolysaccharide is associated with very fragile and weak bone. So it is very difficult to achieve a reduction in such type of patient compared to the conventional cases. In this case, surgical procedure was posterior C1 C2 fixation. Post-operatively, patient has improvement in power and tone, and at time of discharge, patient was ambulatory with support. But after 6 months in OPD follow-up, patient was self-ambulatory without any support. Coming to the fourth case, 11-year-old girl presented gradual progressive spastic quadriparesis for last 1 year, bladder bone involvement for last 6 months. On examination, patient has 4/5 power in all limbs. Tone was increased in all 4 limbs. MRI showing there is cord compression at cervicomedullary junction with some cord intensity changes, and CT showing AD with VI with fused C2 C3 vertebra and occipitalized partial occipitalized anterior C1 arch. So this was case of AD with VI. Compared to the previous case shown, this patient has extreme form of bony deformity like high VI and retroverted odontoid. So this patient qualify our management arm of transoral decompression followed by posterior fixation. Post-op CT showing transoral decompression after removing lower part of C1 vertebra and most of the C2 vertebra with posterior fixation. Patient has improvement in power and tone. After 2 months of follow-up, patient was self-ambulatory. This is another interesting case in which 10-year-old boy presented with gradually progressive spastic quadriparesis for last 3 years. There was no history of any bladder bowel involvement. On evaluation, patient had hypertonia and power was 3/5 in all limbs. MRI showing there is cord compression with some cord intensity changes at cervicomedullary junction, and CT showing AD with VI with occipitalized C1 arch. Why this case is interesting? Because this patient had right side hypoplastic vertebral artery and left single vertebral artery that is known as persistent intersegmental vertebral artery, that also having anomalous course because this artery is passing just above to the surgical area, that is the facet joint, C1 C2 facet joint. So there is another type of challenge who has single vertebral artery which is responsible for supplying brainstem and posterior fossa. So we have to take extra care during surgical procedure to preserve this single vertebral artery. After careful mobilizing vertebral artery posterior C1 C2 fixation done in this case, post-operative patient has improvement in power and tone, and after 3 months of follow-up, patient was self-ambulatory without any support. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Dr. Guramrit Pal to share our departmental research publications and innovations.
Now I'm going to share some landmark publications and innovations from our department in the field of CV junction anomalies that have changed the management algorithm across the world. This book, that is the Craniovertebral Junction Anomalies, The Indian Experience, it is one of the most widely referred and read book in the field of CV junction anomaly in the Indian subcontinent, which has been written by our department. And this book was published 2 decades ago. As we are one of the high volume centers catering to a large proportion of patients with CV junction anomalies, we have introduced a few novel classifications. The first being the Kumar and Kalra classification for the neurological assessment of patients with high cervical myelopathy. This classification has been created from an Indian perspective and it is simple and reducible. The second being the classification of vertebral artery anomalies and the classification of the prognostic factors for the assessment of risk to the vertebral artery during surgery. As most of the practicing surgeons in the field of CV junction anomaly would agree with me that the deciding factor in doing instrumentation at the CV junction is the course of the vertebral artery at the C1 C2 joint. Third, we have also given the classification of C1 C2 dislocation as per the Cartesian axis, that is in 3 dimensions along the x, y, and the z axis, in comparison to the previous classification, which did that classification along the single axis only. Fourth, we have given the classification of the congenital reducible atlantoaxial dislocation. And in this paper, we have also explained the cause for the radiological differences in the patients of the irreducible AAD and reducible AAD. And we have found that in patients with irreducible AAD, there is improper development of the occipital and the cervical segments. And in the patient with reducible AAD, there is laxity of the ligaments leading to the anomaly. Now, as we all know that the severing of the C2 ganglion while doing the C1 C2 distraction is a widespread practice. So in this study done in our department, we have emphasized on the need to preserve the C2 ganglion for better wound healing. And for that, we have given a Savior's criteria. Also, we have modified the Japanese Orthopedic Association score as per the Indian setting. Now I would like to discuss some novel techniques in the field of instrumentation from our department. The first and foremost being the Jans technique for C1 C2 wiring, and this includes making a horizontal groove in the posterior aspect of the foramen magnum and creating a bony bridge along the posterior aspect of foramen magnum. And the advantage of this technique is that it permits the early mobilization of the patient with the reduced risk of redislocation. The second being the knock and drill technique, which is a simple technique for instrumentation in complex CV junction anomalies. And with the use of this technique, we have eliminated the use of fluoroscopy, leading to the better safety profile, both for the patient as well as the operating team, with maintaining the accuracy of instrumentation. Third, being the simultaneous odontoid excision with bilateral posterior C1 C2 distraction and stabilization, utilizing a single posterior midline incision. Now, talking about the innovations in diagnosis, the first being the introduction of a universal craniometric index for establishing the diagnosis of basilar invagination. In this, a straight line is drawn from the posterior aspect of the hard palate to the internal occipital protuberance, and the distance of the tip of odontoid from this line is measured. If this distance is less than 9 millimeters, then the diagnosis of basilar invagination is confirmed. Also, we have given a novel classification of AAD, in which we have classified the AAD along the 3 Cartesian axes, that is along the x, y, and the z coordinates. As already explained by my colleague Dr. Shauman, that the spinal cord passes through a space between the posterior aspect of the odontoid and the anterior aspect of the posterior arch of C1. In this paper, we have emphasized on the importance of the effective canal diameter and how to increase the room for the already compromised spinal cord. Also, we have found that the effective canal diameter in the patients with bony CV junction anomalies is strongly associated with the preoperative status of the patient. As we are one of the leading centers dealing with the syndromic CV junction anomalies, And as my fellow colleague Dr. Vandan has already explained, that the most of the subset of patients that we deal with in such cases belong to Morquio syndrome, Larsen syndrome, Down syndrome, and Klippel-Feil anomalies. And dealing with such patients, we found out that the CV junction anomalies in patients with Larsen syndrome is rare and is surgically challenging. And early posterior fixation in such patients leads to better functional outcome with a halt in myelopathy. Now talking about the technological innovations from our side, this is a novel C1C2 distractor and reducer which has been patented by our institute, and it has been developed in collaboration with the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. Now, we all know that an anomaly, it remains a puzzle till we don't know its exact etiopathogenesis. So keeping this thing in mind, our department did a research, and while doing this study, we have found out that the CV junction anomaly was very much prevalent in the Ganges belt, and CV junction anomalies was more found in patients who are having poor socioeconomic status. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Arun Kumar Srivastava for the concluding remarks. Thank you.
If an exhausting journey ends to a beautiful destination, that journey becomes memorable one. So our destination for this curb-like illness and curse-like illness is to find out exact etiopathogenesis and a definitive answer to this anomaly. So we would like to share some interesting observation made while going through this journey. And the first and foremost is the obvious male preponderance we have noted in our series of 431 patients. Second, most of our patients are coming from the poor socioeconomic strata. Third, an endemicity is observed in and around the Ganges belt. So based on this observation, we started soil and water sampling of the endemic belt with the help of Minor Irrigation Department, Uttar Pradesh. We are also looking for the possible contributing antenatal taboos and peripartum practices with the help of UP PMS doctor and IMA. The genetic study have also commenced. We need to have a national registry system to get an uniform and complete information about this anomaly. Then only further studies will be possible. We are pushing further in the direction of simplifying the surgical procedure with utmost accuracy. And to achieve that, we have started an intramural project regarding 3D models of this anomalous anatomy for proper teaching and as well as accurate surgical procedure, as well as we have started developing some innovative occipitocondylar screws and spacer to achieve a better surgical outcome. This all is possible with a teamwork, and we are happy to have one. Thank you so much.